Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Public domain can be a funny thing, but what's always been in your domain is fear. So settle in for a story that you might not have expected that Doughboy420 likes to call Steamboat Killie.
Mick had finally gotten his crew back together to do one last job. It had been over a decade since their last big heist, and now a new opportunity had fallen into his lap. A very well-off film buff had contacted a friend of his, willing to pay big bucks for classic film history pieces. This friend passed the job on to Mick for a cut of the eventual profits, and from there, he called up his old crew. Donnie was the driver. He was in his 40s now and had kept up with his skills by attending local street races and smoking teenage newbies. Max was the muscle and a bit of a live wire, but he was loyal. He had just gotten out of a stint for assault and was more than willing to get back in the game. Peter was the tech guy. He spent most of his free time doing puzzles and figuring out how to crack locks, a skill that was very useful in the larceny business. Finally, there was Daisy May. She weighed less than 100 pounds and could fit into places that most other people couldn't. She was also a rather skilled pickpocket, a useful asset for any job. Together, the five of them pulled around the block from an old stone building. The job was simple. They would enter through an open window at the back of the building that Mick had previously opened the day before in preparation for the heist. Once inside, they would fill their bags with film reels and memorabilia from as many old movies as they could. Oddly enough, the client was specifically interested in cartoons and animation. Together, the bunch of them climbed through the window, one after another, piling into a back room of the small museum. The place only had a few security cameras near the entrances and was all mapped out where they were and how to avoid them. All in all, it looked like an easy way to make a lot of cash and fast. Mickey and Donnie split off into the drama section while the others continued on toward the animation section. "Oh damn, check that out," Daisy May said, pointing to another room that contained props and film reels from war films. This immediately caught the attention of Peter, who loved the genre, and together the two of them entered to see what they could find, while the single-minded Max continued on toward the goal that they'd come for. As soon as Max entered, he began piling anything that he could recognize into the bag. Old Winnie the Pooh films, Peter Pan, Felix the Cat, anything he recognized. He tossed it into his duffel bag until it was stuffed full, and he almost couldn't close it. He then flung the bag over his shoulder and began walking toward the exit, when he suddenly stopped. He heard a sound, and at first he thought it was a security guard whistling from somewhere, whistling a familiar tune, something from the back of his mind that stuck in his childhood subconscious. Max looked around, trying to find the source of the sound, expecting to run at any moment to avoid security. Then, the familiar whistling stopped. Max scanned the room, but eventually shrugged it off and turned to leave. But when he turned back toward the entrance, he found something that confused him. Now, in the doorway, there stood what looked like a cardboard cutout of a black and white cartoon mouse.
How'd that get there?
Max whispered to himself before stepping forward to walk past the statue, but then he froze in place when he saw the cartoon character turn its head and look up at him. "What the?" Max questioned, now a little bit freaked out, but he didn't have time to react further before the cold-eyed mouse reached down and yanked a rug out from under Max, causing his feet to come with it, knocking him onto his behind. The small figure then skipped toward the man and climbed on top of him. Max's eyes went wide with fear as he looked into the coal-like eyes of the cartoon mouse. He began to panic, watching the mouse's skin glitch with television static as it leaned down to grab a film reel out of the bag beside Max. "No, no, please!" Max begged, before the mouse forced the man's jaw open and stuffed the large film reel into his mouth, splitting the man's cheeks at the corners of his lips before the plastic broke and the jagged pieces pushed their way into his throat, piercing it and turning his muffled screams into suffocating gurgles. The mouse then tipped its hat to the dead thief and hopped off of his body to disappear back into the darkness. Peter and Daisy May picked through the war movie section, taking fake gun props and film-used uniforms. They felt like they had hit the jackpot. "I'm gonna grab these. Why don't you grab those reels?" Daisy May said, standing beside a display of a few script pages. Peter did as she requested and moved to the other side of the room to grab some more film reels, and it was when he was stuffing them into his bag that he heard a strangely familiar whistling of a tune that he knew. "Hey, you whistling?" Peter called out to Daisy May. No," she replied from across the room, thinking that her friend was hearing things. Peter shrugged it off and returned to the task at hand, but once again, he heard the whistling and turned around, annoyed that Daisy May was whistling, but when he turned around, he instead saw a small mouse, about 2.5 feet tall. He wore a little hat that stuck up off of his head, and he walked with a strut in his step, still whistling the familiar tune. "What the hell?" Peter asked in stunned confusion as the black and white mouse pointed at his feet, covering his smiling face with the other hand, as if trying to hide a laugh. Peter looked down to find a second black and white mouse, this one with a bow atop its head between two large ears. This one wore a polka dot dress, and she had a grip on the man's now terrified, shaking leg. Quickly, the mouse yanked his leg out from underneath him, bringing him to the floor, where he struggled to get away and call for help. But the mouse with the bow tie turned his pleas for help into screams when she began twisting his leg like a crank, twisting and spinning it around with ease until the skin and bone dislocated from the rest of his body, where he then attempted to continue to crawl away, screaming in pain. Daisy May immediately came running to her friend's aid, but only screamed when she found the small mouse holding a leg in her tiny hands. But unfortunately, Daisy May would join her friend on the floor when the jolly Mickey Mouse grabbed a hold of her ankle and tossed her to the floor, where she landed on top of Peter, before she was then yanked backwards and thrown through a glass display, shattering it and cutting her up. The small mouse then spun the girl's body around like a rag doll over his head and slammed her back down onto Peter like some twisted professional wrestler. When she landed, it broke both of them, their bones shattering with the force of a truck crash. Mick and Donnie heard the screaming and commotion from across the museum, and they came running to see what the problem was, and when they found the corpses of their friends, fear and anger immediately set in. "What the hell's going on?" Donnie questioned with fright. "Who did this? Come out!" Mick demanded, but he didn't have to wait long to get his wish. Mick and Donnie turned to find the cartoon mouse standing in the doorway that led into the animation room. He looked strange, as if he had stepped right out of a cartoon, but his skin looked odd, almost like television static beneath the white of his skin. He didn't feel jolly and funny like a cartoon should. Instead, he felt dark and ominous. Donnie retrieved his gun and took aim at the children's cartoon character, only for the little mouse to hop playfully behind a display cabinet and and disappear once again. "What was that?" Donnie questioned, still aiming his gun ahead of him. I don't know, but I vote we get out of here," Mick replied, urging him to leave. "Yeah, I agree. Sorry, guys," Donnie replied, apologizing to their deceased friends, before he and Mick made a break for the window in the back. The two of them crossed the main floor of the museum to get to the back of the building. Mick made it across, but Donnie dropped to the floor when two twig-like mouse arms wrapped around his ankles. When he was on the ground, he turned to find the girl mouse in the polka dot dress crawling up his legs, her high heels digging through his clothes and into his skin. Donnie screamed and tried to run away, crawling with her on his lower back, but the female mouse was soon joined by her male counterpart, and as the man shouted and struggled, the cartoon mouse with a steamboat cap climbed on top of him and began pulling on his head. He screamed and stumbled as the mouse on his back stretched the man's neck away from his shoulders until the skin began to tear. Mick turned around in time to see the haunting cartoon mouse rip Donnie's head from his shoulders, pulling a portion of his spine along with it. The professional thief didn't stick around. He spun in place and kept on running. He slipped across the tile floor, nearly falling on his side as he rounded the corner into the back room, where he quickly flung the window open and began to climb out head first, stumbling over himself to escape. Mick then looked down and immediately tried to stop himself. The cartoon mouse was now outside, looking up at him, smiling. The only color on him was that of his friend's blood. Suddenly, the window shut on his back with extreme force, pinning him halfway inside and out, crushing his back. He looked over his shoulder to see the mouse with the bow tie between her ears just glaring back at him through the glass of the window. The man screamed for help as the mouse retrieved a small mallet from its back pocket before forcing the man's mouth open to reveal his pearly whites. The cartoon mouse then once again started whistling so he could drum along to the tune.
Well, if you thought those cartoons from the past were fever dream inducing here before, just wait till we get our hands on them. But you won't have to wait too long. Make sure to stop in again next Saturday for more gore galore. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.